I'll go ahead and get started. The first couple webinars I did, if you guys have gone back and watched them, or if you want to go back and watch them, was programming based and some activities that I use in my classroom to teach programming. From those webinars, there was the talk of putting together just some basic Python programming. Not so much tutorials, but some how-tos and how to integrate it into your classroom. So I have seven parts that I'll be doing. Today we'll just be introducing Python, installing Python, and two very quick programs that you can run just to get yourself started. If you have any Python programming experience, everything that I do today will be very familiar to you, but it's always good to review. So this is part one. Some resources that are great as far as Python. You have the actual Python website. There's a link to the website and a link to the download page on that website. It auto detects your operating system, so you can just choose the newest version of Python to download. I think right now it's 3.364, and it should work fine. Teach Your Kids to Code is a great resource for programs. I use it in my classroom. There's a link both to the web page and to a resource. You can download all of the codes from the book and use those codes in your classroom. It's a very good progression. So, and then you have the Python standard library. As you start to program more, and you're wanting to look for different functions and different arguments that functions take, the Python standard library is actually very easy to use, and it provides examples for everything that you're looking for. There's usually an example, so it's very easy to integrate. Just very quickly, we kind of all probably understand why programming is important to integrate into our classroom and why programming is important to teach. We have 5 main things here. We have computational thinking, logical thinking, which is definitely necessary in the classroom and something that students need to train. Creativity, and one of the big ones here is learning on mistakes. One of the things I find as I'm working with my students is they begin to fix their own mistakes, find their own errors, and they begin to help each other as they learn. And for me, that's the perfect learning environment. If I can have my students wanting to correct their own mistakes and looking for their own mistakes and kind of growing as a learner and growing as a programmer on their own, then that's best case scenario for me. So, and you're also developing cognitive abilities. They're learning, in a sense, they're learning a separate language. It's not entirely a language. There's some differences, obviously, but they are learning how a different language set works and how to use that language to produce an output. And then they learn similarities and differences between programming languages as they move along. I teach Python in 6th grade and 7th grade, and then we do a little bit of Java, not much at all, very simple stuff in 8th grade. By the time my students leave my program, if they stay for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they could have written close to 100 programs, depending on the year. Sometimes I teach a couple more, a couple less, but they write a bunch of programs. And I'm changing a little bit about how I teach programming now that I've learned a little bit more and I've done it for a couple of years. So I'm tending to teach fewer programs and allowing them to interact with those programs more. And I'm generally introducing them with some activity, which takes time. So I'm kind of changing the way I do that. So we're going to be writing less. My 6th graders this year will write fewer programs by the time they hit 8th grade, but I hope they understand what they're doing better. Python is, why Python? It's the second most popular programming language behind Java or JavaScript, depending on which poll you're looking at. It's very easy to use. It's actually a very powerful programming language, and it's just a great choice for beginners. It's very readable, and that's the big thing with Python. Is it reads a lot like sentences. It reads a lot like things that students are familiar with. If you're wanting to change the pen color, the function is called pen color. So in that sense, there's not a lot of terminology that is used that doesn't make sense to the students. So they can generally read left to right and understand to some degree what that program is trying to do or accomplish, or what that function is intended to do. So of all the languages that I've used, it has the fewest times where I have to say, just do this because you have to do it, you'll learn that later. It's very upfront, easy to read, easy to program. And I've had conversations with other teachers, and generally they agree it's a great place to start when you're wanting to learn how to program. So installing programs as simple as going to the download page. You can click on python.org/downloads there. It's linked, so you can get this presentation from the resource library, and then you can navigate to the page. It brings you here. The link will. It does auto detect your operating system, and then I generally download just the newest version. There are some differences between the two. For the majority of what you'll be doing, the newest version is probably the best one. So there's plenty of tutorials out there and very brief videos to watch. I tried to find one that kind of just got right to the point, and at the end of the day, it's as simple as clicking the button, letting it download and installing it. And most of us have installed programs before, so there's no snags there or things that you have to do. It's a straight download, and then it runs. So pretty simple there. I did go through the programs and things that we're going to do today. I aligned them to the CSTA standards. We're looking at algorithms and programming was the main area that programming falls into. We'll be working with some variables today, and then program development. So we're going to use variables to store and modify data. We're going to clearly name variables in a program that we write. If we have any mistakes, you'll have to fix those errors. Using correct terminology when you're trying to teach or trying to program is very important. And then testing and debugging to make sure the program that you are writing runs the way that it's intended to do. The programs that we're writing today are very simple and very easy to see that they are running correctly. But there are programs that will run, they will execute the commands that you have put in, but they may not be, you may not be getting the intended outcome. And sometimes you don't, it's just not obvious. So it's very important to go back in as you grow as a programmer and build in areas to test your programs and make sure those loops are working the way they're intended and making sure the outcome is what it's supposed to be. So sometimes that's a very intentional process, because on the output side on your screen, you may not realize that your program is not working entirely the way you intended it to do. So I'm going to try, as we go through all 7 of these, to align them back to the CSTAs. That way, if you are using those standards, I think the computer science standards for Georgia going forward will have echoes of the CSTA standards in there. If you're already using them from someplace else, then they're aligned there for you. The 2 programs that we're going to write, one is called Hello World. It's the very first program that most people write. And we're going to run that from the shell prompt, which is what opens when you initially open Python. And then we'll write a very simple program called Your Name using the text editor, so that way you can see how the text editor runs. And that'll be sort of the both sides of where you'll sometimes test programs and where you write programs. I use the shell prompt every once in a while just to make sure what I'm typing is correct, or to make sure the terminology that I'm using is correct. But in general, when you write your programs, you will write them in the text editor. Some programs that you write will run back on the shell prompt, and we'll kind of see that today. The big difference is, just real quick here, when you open Python, it's going to open with the Python shell. It'll say shell up in the top left-hand corner, and you'll have your command prompt, the 3 greater than arrows there. and that is your command prompt. So when I open Python, you'll be able to type at the command prompt. You can go up and do a file, new file, or do a control N, and that will open up a new page inside the Python text editor where you can write programs, save your programs, and run your programs. So two very different places. Students, if they forget to open a new page, will start typing their program in the Python shell, and eventually they'll run into problems when they go to run it. So we just get in the habit of, file, new file, or control N to get over to the Python text editor. So I'm going to hop out real quick and let's run those two programs. So when I open up Python, this will be after you download it. The shell will open, you have the command prompt there. And the very first program that we were going to write was to use a command here at the command prompt, and it was hello world. So when you want to print something to the screen, it's a very simple function. It's just called print. And functions in Python have an open and close parentheses on them. I try to use analogies and use different examples. I talk about, a house having a front door and a back door, and they have to make sure that they put both doors on the house. You can kind of come up with your own example, but it's really important that when they write a function that they don't just type right to left and open it and then continue typing. It's the correct habit is opening and closing it and then bringing your cursor back in. They don't realize that's important now when you're just writing one line and you're just writing hello world, but some programs, you might have multiple lines inside there, and as they go forward and they're using different programming languages, they're going to have many, many lines between that open parentheses and the closed one, and it's best to get in the habit of just putting them there. Some programming environments will automatically put the open and close one there as soon as you put the open. So, but as a habit, I like them to type the function out and bring the cursor back in. So this is a function in Python. It shows up purple. You can go in and adjust the properties and the settings for Python. I generally just leave them alone. That way every student has purple, all the colors match, and it's very easy to see. A lot of times they'll like to capitalize the P, and that is not the same as a lowercase p for print. If you go back inside parentheses there, you can put some quotation marks, go back inside, and you can type hello world, which is everybody's first favorite program. Go back out, and when you hit enter, it will execute the print function. It will take what is inside the quotation marks, which is a string, and it will print it to your screen. I can't tell you how amazing that is for students. You start like, it's working. It says hello world. Just to be able to type in a few commands, execute those commands, and get an output is just crazy for them. So and they'll start practicing. They'll want to put their names in there. I go by my last name, so it'll print that out. And I let them for a couple of minutes just start practicing that function. And they very quickly learn that if they want to print something to the screen, that is the function that they use. So and practice going back in. Right, so they can go in and practice printing things to the screen. So the shell prompts, or the shell and the command prompt, can be used for testing different things out. If you want to do 2 plus 2 and see the output, that lets me know that is the correct way to program 2 plus 2. They'll try to do 2 times 2 and get an error. And they quickly learn that 2 times 2 is written differently in the programming language. So it's a good place to test simple stuff, to do your first introductory program. But this is not where you in general write programs. You can actually import a graphics program from here, which is a lot of fun. I think I showed that in one of my other webinars. You can set up a pen and you can actually draw from the shell, from the command prompt, and it'll open up a turtle graphic screen and it will draw. And I can show that later in a different webinar. But from here, if we want to open the text editor, we just do a file, new file, and it opens a clean page here with nothing in it. And I generally take a couple of minutes here and just talk to them about all of the apps that they use, all the great programs and software that they use, and all of that starts with a blank page. And that's what's cool about programming, is everybody kind of starts in the same place. Everybody has to write their first program. Everybody has to open up a text editor at some point and begin learning how to program. And the more they program, the more they learn, the better they get at it. And with the resources that we have, teachers and students, for programming, it's just a very open world if you want to learn. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in a comment here. We use the hashtag symbol to enter in a comment. I generally have them enter their name, kind of like putting their name on their paper. Later on down the road, this is the author of the program. It's describing the program. It's the version of the program. It's what the program is intended to do. So I just have them hashtag use a comment. This is completely ignored when the computer goes to compile and run the program. I could put my grocery list in here in comments, and it would not bother the program. I generally have them put the program name because they always want to know what to save the program as. I'm going to learn how to type here. Program name. And this program is actually just called Your Name. So I do this. So again, they're describing. It's very brief now, but it's just a program name. And later they can add a description as they go through 7th grade, 8th grade. Even on when they start writing their own programs, it will be important that they put some information here at the beginning to let other programmers know what the program is intended to do. And the program name is always what they save their program as when they go to run it. We're going to talk more about variables in part 2, but we are going to use a variable here called name. We're going to set it equal to an input, and this is a function that it requires an input from the user. So someone sitting at the computer, it wants them to type something in. And I tell a whole funny story about going to the club, and you might be looking at somebody and they don't really know, you walk up and you just stare at them, and they don't know if you're looking for the bathroom or you want the phone number. So when you're using the input function, we have to prompt the user for the information that we want. We just can't put the input function there and run the program because it'll be just a blinking cursor. And I try to get them to imagine if they walk up and they want to meet somebody, they just can't stand there and be a blinking cursor. There has to be a cue, has to be a prompt for what information that they want to get. So we have to tell the user whether we want their birthday, whether we want their name, in this case, we want their name. So, what is your name? And the club story goes on for much longer than that. And it gets really embarrassing for the students, and they end up loving it and laughing. But they get the idea that an input function needs a prompt, or else you're just a blinking cursor. But anyway, so we have a variable name. It's set equal to an input. The prompt that we're using inside of the string is what is your name? The user can type in whatever they want. We're hoping that they follow the prompt and type in their name, because whatever they type will be set equal to the variable name. And when we use the variable name in our program, it's just going to go and get what it is equal to and use it. And I kind of describe this as like a box. There's a box with name written across it, and whatever they type in for this input function is going to go in that box. And whenever I want to use that variable, the computer goes and gets the information out of the box and puts it in where I ask it to. So whatever they type is what's going to be outputted. So I generally encourage them to type their name. I then tell them just to use the print function again. They're familiar with that from the very first program that we have written. And we kind of go back to our story. if someone asks you your name, it's really important, that you show that you're listening by maybe repeating their name back to them. You might want to say hi, hi Brian, or, hi Jessica, whatever the scenario is. And then you know that they've actually heard your name. So what we're going to do here is we don't know the name of the person that is at the computer. So this is why we're actually using an input function to get their name. We're setting it equal to a variable name. That way we don't necessarily have to know what their name is, as long as we use that variable when we want to use their name. And I try to remind them that they're not the only person who's going to use this program. Angry Birds has been downloaded by millions and millions of people. If Angry Birds just typed in a name, then everybody would be the same name. So we use variables to store information, and that information can change depending on the user. So we're just going to say hi back. We're going to separate this string and the variable by comma. So we separate arguments inside functions with commas. So we have hi, that's going to print to the screen. And then next to it, it's going to print whatever the variable name is equal to. And we're hoping that it's an actual name and not like camel hair, because they get a little bit crazy sometimes and type in a bunch of gibberish. But they do find out very quickly that does print to the screen. So again, we have all of the basic things that they're going to use over and over and over again in their programming in one very simple program. We have comments, we have variables, we have functions, and we have strings. And we use all four of those things a lot in a lot of different ways. We'll get into loops and some other stuff later, but these are four columns or pillars of programming that they'll use a lot. So to actually run this program, we go to run module, hit OK. I'm going to put it on my desktop so I can find it later. Right there next to my Caribbean cruise photos. And it's going to be your name. So I'm going to hit save. Over here, the shell will open up. And let's put these side by side for a second. Let's see if I can do that so you can see them both. So there is the what is your name. This is the input function running over here. We have a blinking cursor indicating that we're looking for some input. I can type in my name, spell my own name correctly, right? Hit enter. It drops down the next line of the program, which is print hi, and next to it print whatever name is equal to. In this case, name was equal to my actual name. They can go back and hit F5, their shortcut, run it again, and they can type in whatever they want. And it will say, hi, Jessica. I then give them, usually this takes a class period, I give them the rest of the class period to use that name in any way that they want. And very quickly they start asking, well, can I ask them what their favorite color is? Can we ask them how old they are? And it becomes very easy that they go back in. I'm like, yeah, just, whatever, if you're asking for their age, just use a variable called age and set it equal to an input, and then ask the question how old they are, and then use that variable in a print function. And they begin to, on their own, start thinking of scenarios and different questions that they would ask, and how they could use those questions in a sentence. And they start having multiple variables and multiple functions. And I can just kind of sit back and just walk around and make sure that, that they are doing it correctly. Just for a quick exercise, if they were to make a mistake, say, for example, they capitalize, well, let's keep that one lowercase, and they capitalize this name, the variable names have to match, right? There's some other rules we can get into later, but the variable names have to match. So if they go to run this program again, it's going to give them an error once it goes to use the variable. It's saying that the very last line here in Python is usually a gold mine of information. If you can teach your kids to read this very bottom line and kind of tell them each time what each error means, they very quickly learn to check this very last line, and it usually kind of pushes them in the right direction. In this case, it's telling me that I have a variable name that is not defined. And the reason it's not defined is because I have it lowercase n-a-m-e, and I did a capital N here. So if I lowercase that n, these have to match in order to use them. Then if I go back and run the program, it should run correctly. So correcting your own mistakes and finding your own errors is a skill just like programming, but Python makes it very easy to find those mistakes. It kind of generally points you in the right direction. So those are the two very quick ones. Let me bring this back up. One of the activities I do use in my classroom is I have them break up into pairs. I'm really kind of moving towards activity-based programming, where every program that I write has some kind of activity or some kind of real-world connection, in the sense that they get to interact with the activity or the connection before they write the program. This one is I kind of organize my students into groups of two, and they have this conversation back and forth, kind of like the example I gave earlier. But they introduce themselves, they ask questions, and then they kind of write that whole script down and then take that script and convert it over to a program. So this is a great one to try in your classroom. They start off with, hello, my name is Fagan, right? What is your name? The person responds, Brian. Hey, Brian, nice to meet you. That very short conversation becomes print. Print, hello, my name is Fagan. Variable your name is equal to what is your name. At that point, they type in Brian and then print, hey, Brian, nice to meet you. So it's very easy to take this very short conversation that they've had and as a group or as a class, convert those conversations over to programs. And it's fun for them because everybody has their own conversation. You've got to be a little bit quick on your toes because someone might be using age and someone might be using grade or favorite panda bear names. I don't know, favorite unicorns. You just got to be quick on helping them with their variable names. Everything else really stays the same. You just got to help them with matching up their variables, typing out their input functions and their print functions, and remembering that every argument is separated by commas when they start to print out their sentences. So it's very easy. So we learned how to install Python and use the Python programming environment, including the text editor. We learned how to enter programming commands directly into the Python shell. And we learned how to write, save, run, and modify short programs in the IDLE, the integrated development environment that Python uses. So, I'm definitely open for a couple of quick questions, and I'm always open for email. One of the things that I've been wanting to do as an engineering and technology teacher, integrating computer programming in my classroom, is continuing to grow as a teacher and how I teach programming. I'm embarrassed to look back 3 years ago and to see how I taught programming then. So I'm trying to make it more interactive, more of a direct connection, writing programs that we can use for several days and kind of advance our learning with that. So that's kind of my interest and what I'm kind of really enjoying right now and hoping to master over time. And if you have any resources, comments, suggestions, I'm always open to learn. So I appreciate it. And this webinar will be available to listen to. And I look forward to Python programming part 2. Thank you.